guys, it's M4J here, and welcome back to Global Ventures here on Planet Coaster. Now, over the last few episodes, we've been tweaking things, we've been adding things, we've been moving things, we've been doing things, and today is no different. This is Rocky Mountaineer. I built it a year ago now, I think it was, a long time ago, and for a long time I was quite happy with it. And then I rebuilt Bandito, and I realised just how terrible this ride actually was. So I'm going to fix it today, because this is the first step in the Canadian section of the park. So it's only right that I actually made it good, you know. I'm just looking to see what I'm doing. Oh, okay, yeah, I remember what I did here. So yeah, because this is the start of the Canadian section of the park, it's kind of the signature ride of the park. It's also one of the one of the signature rides of the area. It is also, however, one of the signature rides of the park. So I wanted to get it right, and I think I said this the first time I built this coaster. With RMCs, you can really have some fun with it. You got to try and keep it within the realms of reality, but at the same time, you can really have some fun with it, which is what I've tried to do here. So basically, was it 2 weeks ago when I built Kingston? Because of the speeds involved, and because it's an Intamin, everything kind of had to flow. It had to be really smooth. Particularly the transition between the top hat and the speed hill, you know, it all has to kind of fit together and work in a way that, you know, it's comfortable for the riders and can survive multiple cycles. This is basically the opposite of that. Kind of the signature move of RMCs is everything is very staccato-like, in the, you know, quick transitions, not bumpy or rough necessarily, but not smooth either, if that makes sense. So you'll suddenly, like, you'll be climbing up a hill and then you'll suddenly whip to the right and go into an outward bank. That kind of thing. And in theory, it sounds really fun, being able to build a ride like this. You know, you get to play around with lots of different elements. You get to try things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. For example, the big 0G stall that we built, or I built on top of the station many moons ago now. It is still there. I'll be keeping that. Basically, from the top of the main signature drop of the ride to the end of the wave turn, in fact the beginning of the wave turn, because I do rebuild the wave turn as well. Everything else, that stuff stays, everything else gets changed. And again, like I said, it sounds like a really fun thing to do, but in actuality it can be a massive pain in the tuchus if you don't get it right. And that's where I was at with this. I kept getting it wrong. Some things were too smooth, some things were way too janky even for an RMC, and it took me several goes, which you'll see throughout this actually, you will see that. But this element here is probably one of my favourites, the one I'm building right now. I'm trying to remember what it's called. This exists only currently on Untamed at, is it Wallaby? It's Wallaby Holland, isn't it? Let me Google that, because that's kind of key information to know. And yeah, I need to remember what it's called, so I might as well keep the ride up as well. Untamed roller coaster. Oh no, not that one. I think it's at yeah, Wallaby Holland. It used to be called Robin Hood, then they RMC'd it, and now it's called Untamed. It doesn't actually mention what the inversion is called. However, Untamed does hold the record for the most inversions on a hybrid with 5. One of which some people argue isn't an inversion, but the criteria for an inversion is it must rotate at least 135 degrees. So there is an overbank turn on Untamed that rotates more than 135 degrees, and that's what qualifies it as an inversion. I actually include one of those myself a little bit later on in the ride, kind of as an homage. This ride is inspired by quite a few RMCs around the world. Steel Vengeance for the sort of vertical drop, even though we don't get too vertical on any of these drops. I think 85 degrees is the most we go. The 0G stall from Zadra at forgotten what that's called now as well. That's good, isn't it? I'm really with it today. I woke up not long ago, so that's my problem. Energylandia, that's the one. The 0G stall there, and also Goliath at Six Flags. Is it New Mexico? I think it might be Six Flags New Mexico, which is also where the in this case Immelman, but on the real thing it's a dive loop. I tried to include things that aren't really seen on RMCs as well. So we have that kind of Heartline roll, which Untamed does have one. It's more of a barrel roll. Outlaw Run also has 2 barrel rolls. But I wanted to try and include little things like that. And I kind of wanted it to feel like an out-of-control experience, particularly at the top of the mountain here. So you'll get to the top of the lift hill, and you're expecting... Oh, this is me weirding out with banking offsets. I just let the smoothing tool add the offsets in. I know a lot of people on Reddit say that you should do it yourself, but it just looks weird where the tractor suddenly snakes off to the side. I guess, again, it doesn't really work with RMCs, but it might work with a B&M or an Intamin. Because especially on Intamins, you can really see where the offset kicks in. Anyway, that's not what I was going to be talking about. From the top of the lift hill, you just keep picking up speed. And you actually crest, I think you used to crest the top of the hill at about 15 miles an hour, whereas now you do it at 28. And if you think, it's not the tallest drop, this one here. It's only, I think, about 100 foot. But it's the start of 4 or 5 consecutive drops in a row. And the first one, you go over it at 28 miles an hour. The top speed of this ride before this rebuild was 69 miles per hour. Now it's 70. And it's from the same section just before the Immelman. So that gives you an idea as to how much this ride has been boosted with this rebuild. Nice little outward bank there as well, just to really throw you towards the edge. This bit was a nightmare. I don't like this track style. These big iron girders, they look really cool normally, but when you're trying to build a ride like this, and you notice, like here for example, you end up impaling riders with these big steel girders, it's quite annoying. So yeah, not really sure what to do to make that not be a thing. And there's a couple of ideas that I had to give up on because of that. This wasn't one of them, thankfully. I managed to make this one work in the end. But it's an irritation, really, let's be honest. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that either. Do I do some offset here? No, I don't think I do. Again, I think I just keep it as is. But yeah, there's these coasters in the world where I kind of look at them and think, even for me, I think that's a bit too much. And I look at this, some of it looks awesome. Some of it looks absolutely terrifying. But that's really, for me at least, what an RMC is supposed to be. It's supposed to be terrifying. It's supposed to be this out-of-control, wild experience. And, you know, for me, every single manufacturer has an identity. There's something that they're known for. So B&M, very efficient, people eaters, basically. They can get through thousands of people an hour. Intamin is kind of the crazier cousin, let's say, of B&M. So they do things a little bit more unconventionally. The capacity isn't as good. They break down a lot. But you get a better experience, arguably, than you would from a B&M. B&M are really up in their game these days, though. Out of all of the manufacturers around the world, I'd say the two that I most sort of keep an eye on are B&M and Vekoma. Because, I mean, Vekoma is the sensible brother of Intamin, let's say. Where, again, they do things crazily unconventionally and all that. But more often than not, it works. So they got this, I don't know whether it's FLY or just Fly, opening at Phantasialand, sorry. Maybe this year, possibly next. And it's a launched flying coaster, and they've been building this thing for 3-4 years now. And a lot of it's because the theming around it wasn't complete, and they were waiting for that. But I think some of it is also because it's a prototype coaster, and they want to get it right before they open it, which I think is perfectly fair. Some people are criticising them as well, which I just find staggering. There's always a complaint. Somewhere in the world, there's always a complaint. Yeah, you know, you've got the European contenders there. You've also got companies like Zamperla and Zera and Gerstlauer, who are kind of they're kind of the shadow companies. They do a perfectly good job, but they're not at the forefront like B&M, Intamin, and Vekoma. But then you cross over to the USA, and you've got S&S, who are the young upstarts, basically. They're starting to make waves now. They build very good coasters. Steel Curtain, you know, it's probably one of the best new coasters from last year. It was really, really clever how they managed to fit it into such a small area. And I still find it hard to believe the record for inversions in the US is only 9, which is steel curtain. But yeah, really good coaster. And then you've got RMC, which is just like, let's take the rule book, throw it out the window, and do things our way. So they don't have a manufacturer subcontracted to them. They basically build their own rides as well. They got their start in the industry from building rides, which I guess is where that's come from. They used to build rides for, well, El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure was built by RMC, designed by Intamin, fabricated by whoever, built by RMC. And that's what RMC used to do. They used to build rides, then they retracked rides for a short while, and then they decided to build their own. But they got a really good team of people behind it all, which is probably why it works so well for them. But yeah, RMCs. You know, that's the topic of this episode, RMCs. Some RMCs are not quite as successful as perhaps the parks would have hoped. For example, Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point is currently in the process of tearing itself apart. You know, the forces exerted by the trains, it was, let's say, more than estimated, and every now and then they have to go and fix the structure. That to me sounds like a bit of a disaster, but I guess you can kind of use it as a marketing tool. Like, our coaster is so wild it tears itself apart, that kind of thing. I would like to think this coaster here was a bit more... The forces are a bit wild in some places. I think it pulls 4 Gs at the bottom of the quadruple down. But only for a short amount of time. And I guess the Immelman is the only time really where it can shake itself apart. You know, Steel Vengeance has quite a few areas where there's a few outward bank turns and things like that, and you can kind of see where it, you know, the damage might be. This doesn't really have that. We have some outward bank turns, but some of them are taken at low speed. Like the one at the top of the big drop here, it isn't an outward bank to throw you, you know, from left to right with the forces necessarily. It's mainly because you're at the top of a massive drop and then you suddenly veer towards it. It's meant to add that like fear factor. And the other wave turn that I've got is quite low to the ground as well, and it just takes you up and over the train. So I think this one would be fine were it to be built for real. But then again, you know, there are some other elements where it could perhaps rip itself apart. I don't know. It's wrong to speculate, because I think, again, that's part of RMC's identity, and it works really, really well for them. So there's no point, until it becomes a financial issue, there's no point really in changing it, because, you know, as I said, it's worked so well for them. This is the new lift hill. You'll see that I've placed it in the middle of that sort of helix that we have, just after the outward bank and before the major drop. I'm kind of glad I managed to thread it through the eye of the needle there in the end, because one of the problems I had with this original design for this coaster was it kind of all felt a little bit isolated. One of RMC's signature elements really is the fact that a lot of the ride takes place in a similar space. So again, Steel Vengeance, for example, it does 3 laps of itself, and the final section of the ride is just whipping yourself through the supports of the sections above you. And when I first saw the POV of it, I just thought, boring, because it looks like it travels really, really slowly. Occasionally there's a little bunny hop, occasionally there's a roll of some kind. But a lot of people have said online that that's one of the best parts of the ride, because okay, it meanders a little bit, but because you're in this enclosed structure, you kind of feel like you're going faster than you actually are. Maybe that was part of the design. Who knows? But this one was quite spread out, and I feel like you lose part of the RMC way when you do that. Some coasters do that and do get away with it. Wildfire, for example, is a bit more spread out. Outlaw Run is quite spread out. Lightning Rod is very spread out. I don't think you can see most of the coaster from the even the top of the hill. You don't really see where you're going to go and what you're going to do. But I think those two, Outlaw Run and Lightning Rod, because they're sort of built out in the sticks, it kind of adds to that, because you're flying through, you know, woodland and over mountains and things like that. Whereas a lot of the more conventional RMCs are built within a contained area. Now this is kind of a mix of both. So there's kind of like a spaghetti bowl at the bottom of track, and then there's this bit of where the lift hill goes that's quite isolated, particularly as the lift hill now goes through a tunnel, which does add to the experience in my opinion. Here's me just using the smoothing tool. I think I ease out this curve slightly here as well, so you don't whack your head on the girders again as you come through. It really frustrates the hell out of me, these girders. And the only way to get rid of them is to turn off supports. And you see me doing that there. And it just ruins it. It just ruins the ride for me, having to do that. Because I like the support structure of this track. It's actually really cool. I think with RMC, one of the reasons that I particularly like them is they rely on a lot more mechanical systems still. Whereas, you know, B&M, Intamin, they've gone towards the magnetic braking systems. And I think RMC does have that. But they kind of incorporate it into an overall mechanical system. And you just listen to an RMC train climbing up a lift hill and you can really hear that it's all about steel on steel. You know, the anti-rollback is probably about 6 tons heavier than it actually needs to be, just to get that clack, 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 clack noise as it goes up. And I don't know whether that's a deliberate design choice or whether that happened to be the cheaper option or whatever it might be. But for me, it just works. One of the things, as I said, that appeals to me about RMCs is that real classic feel. Because the rides in general are very, very unconventional. And yet they're built in a really classic way. I think that's their kind of mark that they will leave on the coaster industry is the way they've done that. I think it's really cool. Right, this is the crest of the big hill now. The shaping of it is something I really wanted to work on. So a lot of B&M Giga coasters, they have this really weird parabolic hill shape. I used to always think that hills were quite uniform when I was younger, and that's how I used to build them, but they're not. If you actually look closer, you'll see that they're quite tight at the top and then they loosen out a lot more, and it's all to do with airtime. So there's another moment here on this this airtime hill that you can see in the back there. I rebuilt that a little bit later on to include the same sort of thing. You know, it's a bit more I think parabolic is the right word for this. Again, it's ages since I did that kind of thing at school, so it's kind of slipped my mind a little bit. But yeah, I think that's the right way of describing it. It's a bit more parabolic. It's got a bit more of a shape to it. So the hill gradually gets either tighter or looser as you continuously fall, and that adds to the feeling of weightlessness, because you know the profile of the hill is changing enough that the new forces acting upon you are noticeable, and that's the again, one of the signature elements really of this kind of experience. And all hills have it, not just the big ones, but most hills where airtime is the goal, they will have that kind of shape to them. Now this might look weird. This is an outward bank turn. I think the correct expression is wave turn that RMC use, or at least the GP, or not even the GP. It's what enthusiasts use to describe this type of turn. Now as you can see, it looks really derpy from this angle. The railway didn't help. I've had to kind of design it to fit in with the railway. But this is where I like building RMCs, because you get a picture in your mind as to how these things are meant to look, but then you look at real life examples and they are all different. None of them are entirely the same. Even the one on Iron Gwazi is different to the one on, say, Steel Vengeance. The one on Outlaw Run is very, very out there in terms of its outward bankness. You've got the two on Outlaw Run. You've got the one after the first drop, which is more of a... It's not quite like an outward bank. It's more of a reverse bank, I would call it. Because, you know, it literally does just go entirely the wrong way and almost invert you in doing so. So that was designed for that very specific reason. This is the 135 degree section there, by the way. I wanted it to fly back through the structure. And you'll see here I try and make it fly underneath the airtime hill as well, but it doesn't quite work out with the supports, and I couldn't be bothered to build all custom supports there to try and make up for it, so that doesn't happen in the end. But yeah, the Outlaw Run outward bank, that was kind of the inspiration for what I end up building here, where it doesn't just outward bank, but it also kind of turns against itself, and it really tries to throw you out of your seat. And I think Lightning Rod has something very similar as well. It's crazy. It is crazy the way they've done it, but it, you know, obviously it works. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. And people always say that that's one of their favourite parts of these coasters is the outward bank. And I mean, RMCs are notorious for trying to just launch you out of your seat. You know, even the tamest ones have a moment like that where they just say, "Get out of your seat." You know, you will be thrown. And I wanted that too. So the outward bank here is part of that. It's much better profile than the original one that I built. There's another section here as well where we go back over the big drop. The speed that this thing picks up is incredible, but the rate at which it loses it as well is also incredible. So it actually travels quite slowly through the wave turn. I believe this hill here is also slightly taller than the wave turn, or you know, around about the same height as the wave turn. And yet I put the brakes not long after this, and yet it flies into the brakes so fast that the original brake section I built doesn't actually slow the coaster down enough. So I had to rebuild that. It just mystifies me. Like Wildwood over in the heart of the forest section of the park, this does have a station fly through, but by the time it gets to the right height to go over the station, it's actually travelling quite slowly. So I wouldn't call it a fly through, more than a just walk over, something like that. Something a bit more akin to how fast it's actually going. This is me again wanting to just bulldoze these girders because they drive me up the wall. There should be an option like supports without girders. I don't know how that would work given the type of coaster this is, but it would be nice if that was an option, because the girders are the problem. And the last thing you want is someone flying headfirst into a steel girder at 60 miles an hour. That would hurt quite a bit. So that was a bit of a pain. This is me checking the pacing of the ride. That is one thing that still bugs me, is the section after the lift hill is just a fraction too long still for the overall pacing. So I might have to throw in a block brake or something somewhere to try and I don't know, break it up a little bit more. I suppose what I could do is build one immediately after the station fly-through, which is what I originally did, but I built it too low. So I could increase the height of that and make it work. Either that or just control the dispatch of trains a bit more. So I think they're dispatched 40 seconds apart, 40-50 seconds apart at the moment. I think in real life RMCs do load quite slowly, so it would probably be maybe 60 seconds apart, which would make it work. The last thing I want though, because the start of this ride is quite exciting with the 3 inversions, and then you fly into the tunnel where it's absolutely pitch black in there. The log flume was going to interact with that section of the ride as well, so there will be some lighting in there, but it's pitch black. You're flying at 40 miles an hour right next to a channel of water. It's meant to be exciting. Then you hit the lift hill. Now I was watching a video recently where it said do not put the lift hill at the end of the ride because you kill all the excitement. So I put it in the middle. I didn't want to put it at the start either because I wanted this thing to kick you in the gut straight out the station, which is why the lift hill is where it is. But with the pacing of the ride, the last thing I want is people stuck at the top of the lift hill waiting, because that would just zap all the energy out of the ride. So I'm going to have to work on that to make sure that doesn't happen. And if it's a case of delaying dispatch times out of the station, then that will work, because once you're moving, you should stay moving. That's my opinion. You shouldn't really ever have to wait. You've got rides like Shinkansen where you do have to wait at the end because of the way the loading and unloading works. And that's something I've kind of grown to accept with this as well. This is the station walkthrough that I'm building now, and as you can see, it's it's meant to be like a little airtime thing just before the end. It's kind of meant to throw you out of your seat a little bit. We've got an unbanked turn there as well, just to put some laterals in. And I like the idea of it dropping down here like this, just before the station. So the track that goes into the station will veer into the station rather than go straight in. This was me building the first set of brakes, which did nothing to slow down the coaster. Now I spent ages wondering why is it not letting me put a block brake, and apparently I still had the track slightly banked, so I'll have to go and fix that. But yeah, I liked this version of the brakes here. The only thing I didn't like was the fact that the first set of trim brakes there didn't actually slow the train down enough. It still entered that block brake at the bottom at about 25 miles an hour or something like that, and it was supposed to slow it down to 10. So you can kind of see where the problem there was, and how bad that was. But yeah, I would have liked to have kept that. I might rebuild that actually. I'll rebuild it and do it properly this time. And then just tidying up some of the stuff here. So that's basically it for this episode, guys. The rebuild here is pretty much done now. There's a couple of other tweaks that I have made off camera, smoothed it out a little bit more, changed the profile here and there. Nothing major, nothing too exciting, but it's just designed to... that overbank there, by the way, where you go underneath the wave turn, that's probably my favourite bit after the double death roll type inversion. I just really like the way it does that. Especially next to the train as well, it looks awesome. But yeah, next time we're probably going to be theming this, adding a station building, which I already have an idea for a design of, and then maybe even adding a log flume as well. We'll see. But until then, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course if you're enjoying the series, drop some comments down below with ideas for future episodes. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to the channel, thank you guys for your continued support. Don't forget to head over to all the social media links down in the description as well. It really does help out the channel. And until next time, I will see you soon.